Hello everybody. So, used to do YouTube a long while ago. Back when I was a teenager, I did some tech videos. Don't ever know what happened to that account really. I kind of stopped using it, and I think YouTube might have deleted it because I just didn't use it anymore. But nonetheless, it was all tech stuff. And, you know, because I'm a nerd, I enjoy this kind of stuff. But today what we're going to be showing you how to do, for those of you who are nerds like myself, is how to run Raspberry Pi, Windows on Raspberry Pi. Now, you can see I've got a Pi 4 running right now, which you can see that right here. Don't have the best mount for the camera. I'm using on my iPhone here, so I kind of have it on its side to record this, so I apologize in advance for any possible crappy quality. But nonetheless, what you're going to want to do here is get Pi apps first off. So Pi apps, since I already have it on the Pi 4 here, because this is where we're going to set up the initial SSD to put into the Pi 5 to run it. I do have a Pi 5 with 8 gigabytes of RAM, and you can see that pictured right here. So this is the Pi 4 that I'm going to be doing most of the install from. Well, I mean the download for the install. So Pi apps is something that you are going to need. Now, what I like to do is not access it from the shortcut because it gets weird sometimes, but you're going to go into Pi apps there, and you're going to see that it's got all kinds of different things that you can download. We'll do those updates in a bit. Actually, you know what? Might as well just do it now because it's generally very quick. Now, this is what it's going to look like, too, when you go to initially install the Pi apps app store. You're going to see the command prompt pop up or the terminal pop up, and you're going to see it start downloading the Pi apps. So now that that update's done, what you're going to want to do is you're going to go, I just like to do it from all apps. They do have a lot, but if you scroll down, you just use the alphabet. Windows Flasher is what you're going to download. Now I already have it installed, so I'm not going to do it here. You can see that it gives me the option to uninstall it, which I'm not going to do. But Windows Flasher, it's a very easy tool. Now, it's important to keep in mind that the Pi 5 can boot the latest version of Windows, and we're going to show you that now. Now, let me go ahead and open up Windows on Raspberry Flasher here so we can go ahead and get things started. So you see I'm going to open the War Flasher. Now, you can see this pop-up come up, and that's because the Windows on Raspberry project is kind of slowly fading out. So you can see clearly here that the Pi 5, this does say if you want to use it on the Pi 4, which I did attempt that. I used a little flash drive, and it's actually going to be this one right here, a Samsung flash drive that I had installed Windows on, tried to run it off the Pi 4. It was not the most stable in the world, and the problem was, of course, Windows is constantly updating, as we all know, even on their ARM versions. Because remember, this is going to be an ARM version of Windows because Raspberry Pi is a ARM-based system. So the Pi 4 wasn't very, and it even has 8 gigabytes of RAM. It's this one right here, and it didn't work. The problem is each time Windows pushed an update to it, if it was a massive update, it would just get frozen in the just a moment loop. You know, the dreaded just a moment loop, spinning and spinning and spinning. 4 hours later, still spinning. I kind of gave up on that. Might try it again in another video. But you can see here that they do have something called the BVM project now. Now, what that does is that essentially opens up a virtual, like an emulator, to where you can run Windows ARM without having to install it on a separate system. I mean, install it on like a separate drive. You can run it all from Pi OS. Now, I don't really do that, and I haven't tried it yet. Maybe we'll explore that in another video. Another issue you can see, though, too, is the Pi 4. If you do decide to try this on your Pi 4, it can only boot version 22.631.2861, which is from December of 2023. It can't boot any newer version of Windows, which is the issue when you try to do updates, because Windows put a new requirement for ARM v 8.1, I believe, which the Raspberry Pi 4 doesn't recognize that, so it just freezes. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to go to proceed with the War Flasher, and you can see here it's going to let you choose. So what I'm going to do is generally we'll just do Windows 11. That's going to default to the latest version, but you can see you can select which Pi you have. Now, it's not at all recommended to do it on the Pi 3. Pi 4, it's not the most stable, even with an 8 gigabyte. And like I said, it kind of crashes after Windows tries to do the latest update for August. And then we've got the Pi 5, which is our goal. We're going to do it on the Pi 5. Now, you can see here, I'll just go this route. and choose an exact version of Windows to download. And you can see here it gives us a whole list. So you can see that the latest version it will run for the Pi 4, we're going to talk about that for a second, would be 12/8/2023. It will not run June of 2025, which is the latest version. But since we're doing this for the Pi 5, we're going to go ahead and select that. You're just going to say, of course, whatever country you're in my case, the United States, we're going to say English, and it's going to ask you which drive that you want to install this on. So this is going to be the SSD that I have, the portable SSD. It looks like a little flash drive. It's a little handy little gadget, and it runs it a lot more smooth. I did try it on a flash drive, not the best, even though it was a high-speed flash drive per se. So we're going to go ahead and select that. Now, I was running Ubuntu off of that flash drive for the Pi 4, off of this SSD for the Pi 4, so it may give us issues, because what I have noticed is sometimes, if you try to do it from a if you try to flash it to a drive that already has an operating system on it, sometimes it'll give you issues with the partitioning. It will say it failed to create the partition, exiting now. In that case, we would just bust out gparted, which is a system on Raspberry Pi that you can use, or you can, if you have a Windows-based computer, just format it directly from that. It's recommended to do it into the FAT32 format. And I do have gparted on here. I'll do another tutorial on how to get that. But for now, let's focus on the task at hand, which is the Windows on Raspberry Flasher. So what we're going to do here is, because of the fact that I'm flashing this for a Raspberry Pi 5, we're not going to use RAM. Because the problem is if we use RAM, it is going to store everything on this one, not that one. May still work, but I'm not going to take that risk. So I'm going to say use this, the file that's already going to be embedded. And you can see target drive here is going to be that SSD. It says don't change anything beyond this point. If you want, there is a way, so you can go in and edit to make it overclock. Even though you can technically do that on the Pi 5's UEFI, that will install with the Raspberry Pi bootloader. So we're just going to hit OK with that, and we're going to hit flash, so you can see this comes up, and it starts downloading the UEFI firmware, and it starts downloading the image. Now, this is a legitimate Windows 11 ARM image that it pulls directly from Microsoft servers, so it's completely legal with that. Essentially, all Windows on Raspberry Flasher does is it makes it to where it's bootable, converts it to be bootable for Raspberry Pi. Because the problem is, of course, if you download the ISO directly from Windows and you try to just boot it directly from that on the Pi, it's not going to recognize it. It's not going to boot, it's just going to throw errors. So this is definitely the way to go. You can see it runs pretty quick. I do have gigabit internet. It's generally pretty quick. We're already at 2.2 gigs out of 4.2. Now, sometimes this process can be a bit slow. It can actually take several minutes. If it does, I'll just go ahead and edit so we can, cut that out so you guys aren't sitting here for 5+ minutes, 10+ minutes, waiting for this to install. So you can see it's still downloading the Windows image. This is going to be Windows 11 ARM latest version for the Pi 5. So go ahead and let it do its thing here. Now, I would pause here, but I'm going to go ahead and let it do it, because you'll see once it gets done this, we're going to go ahead and see if it, not see if it. We know that it's going to pull up a bunch of different commands. You're going to see a bunch of scripts running so it can flash it. So right now, hopefully you guys can see that, it is at 3.5 out of 4.2 gigs. It installs pretty quick depending on your internet speed, and despite it being on a Pi 4 right now, it still loads pretty quick. Now, it is important to note while I'm working on this, while the system's working on this, that with the Pi 5, the only problem is on the Pi 4 there are some native drivers. Now, they are third-party drivers developed by the Windows on Raspberry community, because of the fact that Raspberry Pi is not supported by Windows, and Windows is not supported by Raspberry Pi, so the Raspberry Pi Foundation does not release anything Windows related, so you can download it easily to the Pi. That's why you have to use this third-party program. And that leads me to the point of there are no drivers available for the Pi 5. So you're going to see once we get everything up and running, it will run, but I do have some things that I had to do here. So we'll pick this up for a moment, and you can see. So I got a Anker speaker, so I can have audio, because the HDMI, audio over HDMI, does not work when running Windows on Raspberry. You'll still see your screen, so you get the HDMI minus the audio part. I also got a USB splitter here, or hub. so I can extend what I need to connect to this, because of course this only has 4 ports. So I have the SSD, existing SSD on here, which will unplug and plug this new one in once it's downloaded, so I can show you guys the install process. But again, problem is doing the partitioning for the drive, which I'm kind of surprised, because generally it causes issues if I already have an operating system installed on this specific drive. It'll cause problems when it tries to partition. It'll generally throw an error and tell you you have to format it. Now in this case, it did do the formatting on its own with no problem, which is great. And you can see it's copying everything over to the SSD. Again, not the quickest process in the world, can sometimes take several minutes for this to get finished, but once it's done, you'll get a little pop-up that'll say that it is done. Now it's time to reboot your device, which we're getting very close to it saying that. And you can see it's flashing the drivers and the firmware. Now the drivers that it is flashing, like I said earlier, and there's that little screen, next steps, boot up the new SD card, or in my case, drive. After 30 minutes, War Installer will begin. It's generally a lot quicker than that, to be completely honest with you. But when it says it's installing the drivers, what it means is basic graphics support. So graphics, the USB port drivers, things of that nature, because again, no native driver support there. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and just turn off the Pi 4. And then we're going to go ahead and unplug. After that's done, we'll go ahead and unplug the SSD. I'm going to do that right now. And you can see, again, this is the SSD that I used, just 128 gigs. So now what we're going to do is unplug the existing SSD from the Pi 5. And I don't want to move the camera just because of the fact that, you know, it's likely going to fall if I try and not go back up properly. So definitely got to invest in a mount. But at this point, we're going to go ahead and unplug the existing SSD that already has Windows successfully installed on it on the Pi. And what we're going to do is now plug in the new SSD, and we're going to get it booted up. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do here, of course, once I get it plugged in, don't know why it's being so difficult. All right, perfect. It's plugged in now. So what we're going to do is, of course, with the Pi 5, handy part about that is you do have a power button, so it's not like you have to unplug and plug it back in. So we're going to turn it on now. We're going to watch everything get started here. So we'll let that get started, and you can see it is going to run from the USB because I did have it set to the USB to boot from USB. You're going to want to do that, of course, and you can just hit escape. You can get into the UEFI menu for the Pi 5, and you could just go into the boot manager. Now, because we're installing the 64-bit version of Windows 11 ARM, you're not going to have to worry about doing what you would have to do on the Pi 4 and going in here and disabling the RAM limit of 3 gigs. You don't have to do that here. So you would just go into the boot manager, and you can see it's set to boot directly from here. The flash drive, well, it's going to try the SD card generally first, but you can change all of that. Now, you're going to go ahead and hit continue, and you're going to see the Windows on Raspberry, well, the Raspberry Pi boot pop up, or boot image pop up, and you're going to see it's going to start spinning here. Another thing to note, though, is it's not going to be it is going to be pretty clear, but it's also not the best of quality in relation to accelerated graphics. So the accelerated graphics for the Pi 5, for the Pi, since it's not already supported, like I said, there's no native drivers for this. You are going to, you're going to have some issues with graphics. So the graphics are going to be good. You're going to see they're going to be decent, but you're going to see some images look a little washed, just because of the fact that the Raspberry Pi does not support accelerated graphics. Now, we're going to go ahead and select which drive we want to install this to. So you can see the SD card that's already in there. Just runs Windows on, Pi OS. Just have that on there in case I ever need it from the Pi 5. And then we're going to go ahead and select the installer drive, so the SSD. It's going to say to select your version of Windows. You can do Windows 11 Home build, the single language build, Home, or Windows Pro build. I am going to do the Windows 11 Pro. And you're going to see that it just says getting ready. And preparing the disk. Now, this process does generally take a while, so I'm not going to make you guys wait for all that. We'll stop the video and resume once it gets finished. but you can see here that it just says preparing the disk. After that, it's going to start the install. So I'll be back after that finishes. Alright guys, so you can see here that it already got finished, so it says it's restarting. So we're going to let it go ahead and do its thing there. Alrighty, so generally pretty quick. You can see it's getting ready. I mean, when I pause the video, there's probably about a 5-minute lapse before it got finished installing, so it's generally pretty quick. So right now, it's just getting ready. We'll go ahead and let it do its thing. Hopefully it's pretty quick. But you'll get to see here in just a moment, once it's finished with this, and the Windows screen pops up to welcome you to Windows, you will see what I mean by the fact that the graphics are not in great shape because of the fact that the, as you can see, it's crystal clear here, but you'll see what I'm talking about, to where it looks like, it essentially looks like you're watching a video from a computer on back in the 1990s or early 2000s. So we're going to go ahead and let it finish here, and once it comes back up, we'll go ahead and resume with everything. Alright, so looks like we've got some action here, so we're going to wait and see. It generally restarts a couple of times, so that is not uncommon. That's actually what it just did right now. So you can see it's booting back up here, and shortly you're going to see that screen pop up that's going to show you exactly what I am talking about when it comes to the accelerated graphics not really being up to par because they're not supported. So we'll go ahead and just give it a moment here. And you can see just a moment. Now, at this point, I'm not worried about updates causing any issue on the Pi 5, so once we get through the setup, I'll go ahead and let it do its thing when it comes to doing Windows updates, because as you all know with Windows, like I mentioned earlier, they love to push through updates all the time. So, of course, during Windows 11 setup, they kind of make you, yeah, there we go. But they kind of make you, and look how slow that comes up. They kind of make you do these updates in the beginning, though. So you'll see it'll do a bunch of updates normally. So we're going to go ahead, and you're going to select your region accordingly. So like I said, setup is not the quickest graphics-wise. So you can see it runs a little bit slower. Now, once we get Windows up and running, you'll see it's decent. It's pretty quick. But it does take a moment while you're setting everything up. Now, in the event that you don't have internet, or you don't have an Ethernet available, or an Ethernet dongle for USB available, of course, like I said, Wi-Fi will not work. So you're going to have to go ahead and bypass the setup, which you can do in command prompt. Will bypass the internet setup, which will essentially create a local image of Windows. And once you get the USB adapter connected to internet, then at that point you'll be all set. So in my case, US, we're going to say yes. I do not want to add a second keyboard layout. And this is actually going quicker than I thought it would. And then here we go where it says, oops, you've lost internet connection. So it takes a moment for the system to be able to acquire an IP address when you're doing this. It's not the quickest. So it'll say that you've lost internet connection. Sometimes you'll have to hit retry a couple times. And you're going to see here that it says it's connected to the network, but it may do the same thing. An install driver would just be if you had a file on like a flash drive with a driver on it, which you can't do because, again, no drivers for Pi 5 running Windows on Raspberry. So we're going to go ahead and hit next. Now, it may give me the same error again. And if it does, yep, we may go the route of the skipping the network setup. So we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to let it just take a moment here to try to get an IP address. So we'll give it a second here, because even though it says connected, it sometimes takes a minute. All right, so we'll go ahead and try again. Now, so what we're going to do at this point, you guys are going to get to see, is bypass the internet setup. So you're just going to hit Shift and then F10. That's going to bring up Commands Prompt. Now in Commands Prompt, what you're going to do is you're going to type in OO, and first off, should probably click on it. You're going to do OOBE, and then you're going to do / bypass NRO, so network requirement, and you're going to hit enter. Or in my case, I typed it in wrong. So you're going to do OOBE, if I can type here, and then you're going to do backslash, not forward slash, my apologies, folks. Bypass NRO, and you're going to see that it's going to reboot it here. Now, after it restarts, you're going to see that it will give an option. Now, what I found in my, sorry to go off on the exit ramp here, what I found in my experience is when you do the reboot after doing bypass network setup, magically it seems to acquire the IP address and it doesn't actually skip internet setup. It goes ahead and does everything that it's supposed to be doing. Now, in the event that it does not acquire an IP address and it says you have to connect to a network again, what you will notice is instead of saying install drivers, you'll see a I don't have internet or I don't have internet available button up here, which you can click on, which then, like I said, creates a local version of Windows or a local user on Windows rather than doing the internet setup. And you can do that if you're, you know, again, don't have a USB to Ethernet dongle, but you want to get things up and running before you do have one. So it does kind of take you through the setup again a little bit when you do it that way. And again, you're going to get to see here that the accelerated graphics are not supported. So yeah, it's going to go ahead and do that again. So we're going to say United States like we did the first time. And this, of course, US, we're going to say yes. We're going to say skip. We don't want to add a second keyboard layout. Now, it's of course important to select your correct keyboard layout, because if you do not, some of the keys may be transposed. So this is perfect. So no internet, still identifying. Might let it sit there for a minute, but you can see now instead of saying next being grayed out and install driver, you saw the option there, which has now disappeared because it looks like it may have gotten the IP address acquired. But the I don't have internet button, if I would have clicked that, it would have let me continue with everything. So we're going to go ahead and hit next. And this is where, of course, it's going to do the checking for updates with, again, the crappy behind graphics running right there. And I don't know if you can tell by the camera, but you can see this a little washed, the image here while it's doing its setup. So then go ahead and let it do checking for updates for a bit here. And this can take some time depending on how many updates are available. Now, again, just to reiterate, we did the latest version of Windows 11 on this install, so there won't be an extreme amount of updates, but it still can take a while. So we're going to do please review the license agreement, hit accept, just the basic Windows agreement, let it do its thing here for a moment, and that should take us to the next prompt, which is generally where it tries to get us to sign into Microsoft, which is another requirement with Windows now, or the newer versions. They make you sign into your Outlook account. If you do not have an Outlook or Microsoft account, it will prompt you to create one, so you can set it up. It won't really let you bypass that. If there is a way to bypass that, you guys can let me know in the comments, but I am not currently aware of any way to bypass the Microsoft login requirement. Only way you can really do that is, like I said, if you do have the Ethernet unplugged, you don't have an Ethernet hooked up to it, and you do I don't have internet option when you're setting it up, then yes, it won't prompt you at that point to set up your Microsoft account. We're going to do set up for personal use, because of course I'm at home at the moment. And then you're going to see here that this is generally, again, checking for Windows updates. Like I said earlier, Windows loves to do updates, and good thing about that is, though, is it always tries to make sure you have the latest and greatest. Most of Windows updates are security and database updates. Normally, they're not large cumulative updates, I'm sorry. Although there may be one available for this, because they did release one in August, which is what seemed to have stopped the Raspberry Pi 4 from being able to boot Windows. There's really no way to bypass that when you're setting things up, unless you just unplug your Ethernet cable and go the route of skipping the internet setup. However, as soon as you plug in the Ethernet port, of course, at that point, because the Ethernet port on the Pi 4 is a supported driver, that's where it's going to check for updates like it's doing right now on the Pi 5, and that's where it's going to try to install that August update, which seems to screw everything up when trying to run it on the Pi 4. So I'm going to go ahead and do checking for Windows updates. I'll let it do its thing here for a moment. And here we go. So I'm going to, at this point, pause the video, because this generally does take a while, but you can see that it's going to do all the latest updates here. So I'm going to go ahead and let it do its thing, and we'll be back after it is finished. Now, we're booting things up because what I decided to do here is just launch the one that I already have Windows installed on and set up. That way you guys don't have to just watch me sign into Microsoft and all of that good stuff. At that point, that's what it was going to do anyway. Once it was done the updates, it would have had you sign into your Microsoft account, taking you through the, oh, would you like to sync this? Would you like to sync that? All of that good stuff. So we're going to turn on the speaker here so we can have some audio. Again, that's what you're going to have to do. Now, it is actually 238 here right now, but 146 is when I turned it off. And of course, the Raspberry Pi does not have, you know, RAM or any, I mean, does have RAM, but it doesn't have like a hardware clock. So when you turn it off, it's not going to remember the time until it reconnects to the internet. So we're going to go ahead and sign me in real quick with my PIN. You can see, look how fast that popped up, and you can see here that it's test mode, Windows 11 Pro. So of course, Windows 11 ARM is not fully out. It is still in a test phase, which is why it's kind of annoying, and people get pissed off with the fact that they have to buy a license for it, which is why most people resort to scripts, because essentially you're paying Microsoft 30 bucks for a beta. So that's why a lot of people go ahead and do the scripts, which you can do through PowerShell. If you guys do opt to do that at your own risk. Again, legality, it's a little bit of a gray area. It wouldn't be necessarily considered legal. So if you're going to do that at your own risk. But this is what it looks like here. So you can see the time is now updated. So we've got 2:38 p.m. on the 8th of September, which is today. And you can see that I've got stuff on here already, such as Google Chrome, Raspberry Pi Imager. But look how quick everything generally loads here. So it's already popped up. And I'm just going to exit out of that. But yeah, this is how you do it. And you can set everything up for the most part. The only thing is like I said, no driver support. So our sound is coming through the speaker here, as you can hear. And graphics support. So things like Nightlight aren't going to work, because like I said, since there's no graphics support, Nightlight does require graphics support, so it's not going to work. But yeah, if you guys have any questions or comments, definitely drop them in the comment section. Like I said, I'm going to leave in the description the SSD, link to the SSD that I recommend, and the USB hub. And I'll leave a link to the Anker speaker and the little USB to audio dongle that I have as well. I'd say altogether, with the extra stuff that I had to buy to run this, I'd say probably added up to about maybe 80 bucks or so. But yeah, again, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. And next tutorial, we'll go ahead and try it on the Raspberry Pi 4. But let me know what you guys think.